Hey guys, so I want to talk to y'all about something I'm really excited to really get in the details of because I think it's a really good thing. It is a good thing, and a lot of fruit comes from it. The Lord's had it on my heart to share it with y'all. You'll see that the title of this message is that not all comfort is good, and that not all discomfort is bad, right? So with that being said, comfort is something that Satan uses a lot of times in life to keep us in bondage, whether that be spiritual bondage or, it could be things in the natural, like financial bondage, or just whatever. Bondage in general, though, a lot of times Satan will use comfort to keep us there. And a lot of times God uses discomfort in order to take us into what he's actually taking us to, or in order to mold us and shape us into who he has created us to be, little by little, piece by piece, right? But with that being said, the Israelites, they had plenty of food to eat. They had all of their essentials they had in Egypt, right? But they were slaves to Pharaoh. So they were captives. They were bound to that slavery. But they didn't have to do without. They were able to feed their kids. They were able to feed themselves. They were they had shelter. They had what they needed. But they were bound to the slavery that Pharaoh had them in. So when the Lord told Moses to lead them into the promised land, there was a wilderness process that was required, that it did not have to be 40 years. I forget, I think it was supposed to be 40 days. Y'all don't quote me on that. But it wasn't even supposed to necessarily be a long process. But it turned into 40 years due to their lack of faith, their complaining, their lack of faith. But my point is, when they left, they were very excited to leave Egypt because they were excited about the promised land. But, on the journey that they were on to the promised land, that is when they started seeing, wait a minute, we had all the essentials back in Egypt, and now, the Lord was providing everything that they needed, but it was coming in different form. The Lord was giving them manna, right? The Lord was giving them each and everything, their essentials that they needed, but it was coming in different ways, and it took relying on God instead of always just being there, ready for them. And so it took them out of their comfort zone. Their comfort zone was not there. They were not comfortable. They had actually a lot of discomfort, and they had to rely on God on a level that they were not used to because of leaving Egypt, right? So they actually got to a point of such frustration that they actually I'm thinking they basically said to the Lord, "Have you brought us out here to die, God?" Because they literally were like, "Lord, did you take us out here to die? Did you take us out here to starve to death?" No, God was providing, but he was not providing in ways that they were familiar with. And they had to actually walk in faith in order to see that provision instead of the comfort that they had in Egypt, which, like I said, they were bound. They were bound to the slavery in order to have those essentials. So anyways, getting to the promised land, which was the land of milk and honey, which was the land of overflow, abundance, and everything that God had for them. The land that was their portion. It was God's portion for them, the people of God, the good things that God has for us. But there's a preparation process. And many of us are walking into seasons of harvest. But regardless, when God is calling you to do something, even in the harvest season, it doesn't matter what season it is, when God calls us to do something, a lot of the times it is something that is not comfortable to do. I've heard it put, if God says to do it, it's going to be easy and it's going to all fall into place. Not necessarily. No, not all the time. And sometimes, I'm not saying that that never happens. I'm not saying that there aren't times where God says to do it and it just bam, bam, bam. Everything falls into place and it was easy. But many times, just like the Israelites, the Lord actually, there's a lot of things that come into it, and there's a lot of discomfort, and there's a lot of walking blindly, not knowing the details, and having to walk in faith and just jump in and get our feet wet in something that is not by nature easy to do. Because it's so easy to do something that God says to do when we can see all the details, and we can see it right there before us. But when God says something and you can't see the details, and you don't even really fully know where you're going, kind of like Abraham, he had to walk. The Lord told him to go to basically the land that God had for him, and he didn't even know where that was. He didn't even know what that looked like, but he had to step out and do it. That wasn't easy. You know how many mornings he probably woke up thinking, like the next morning, just thinking, what am I doing right now? But I'm trusting God, because he is a trustworthy man, right? But that was not necessarily an easy process, but it was a good process, because it required faith, it required stretching, and it required a lot of discomfort. But God was bringing Abraham to all that he had for him. And just walking in obedience, his blessings were on the other side of that, which was his promised land, right? Blessings are on the other side of our obedience, even when we can't see the details, and even when it doesn't fully make sense, and it doesn't seem like something that's logical or reasonable to do. Many times that's when God is in it, because a lot of times he will tell us to do what seems so crazy to even ourselves, much less other people. But when God says to do it, do it. And not just that, regardless, maybe like I said, many people are needing breakthroughs for things, like I said, maybe it's a spiritual breakthrough, maybe it's something in the natural, but maybe it's a spiritual thing, maybe it's a mental thing. Strongholds that are built up in the mind require starving, because what you feed the longest will become the strongest, right? So what you feed is going to get stronger and stronger, mentally speaking, spiritually speaking. So starving that, a lot of times, while taking thoughts captive and submitting them, taking thoughts captive and rebuking thoughts and not feeding into them and not dwelling on them. Instead, that is not always an easy process. Thoughts of depression, thoughts of suicide, thoughts of greed, thoughts of whatever your stronghold may look like. If if there's something that that God is telling you that there's a process to break through on. It's not always easy, and it's not always comfortable, and sometimes it takes such big faith to do what it is that we have to do in order to be set free. Like I said, not just spiritually, but even in the natural. Regardless, financially speaking, in order to get somewhere financially, a lot of times we have to budget. We have to do without some things, and that's not always comfortable, but we know the results of it in the future and in the long run are a good thing. So regardless of what it is, I just want to explain that comfort a lot of times is what the enemy will use to keep you in bondage, and discomfort a lot of times is what is necessary in order to be shaped and molded into what he has made us to be, who he's made us to be. There's pruning, there's things that go into that, and also in order to just give us his promises, the promises that he has for us. A lot of times it's going to take discomfort, blindly walking in faith, which is not something that we naturally do as people, but it's literally what is required a lot of times to receive what God has for us, or to just simply be in the will of God, because it's not all about us. But I just wanted to get on here and just talk about that with y'all. I hope that this blesses you. I hope that this is something that brings insight or even confirmation. So we will talk soon. Y'all have a wonderful day.